Hello everyone, this is Tim, and I want to talk about a little setting that I made that kind of sprung off of the Grimm D20 book that I did a video of earlier. I'll put a video link down below so you can go see my original video. But yeah, geez, I can't talk. Shadow Children was the idea that I came up with, and I wanted the setting to kind of have a little bit of themes of child abuse in there and putting a spotlight on child abuse. Um, Not really like a main theme, but just one of the themes. And the idea is that at some point in the child's past, maybe recent past, maybe very long ago, um, or at least from the eyes of a kid very long ago, something really terrible happened to them. And I kind of left that open ended. And the idea was that each character had had some tragedy happen to them. And because of that instance, it warped them, it affected them, it changed their worldview, their outlook, it changed their emotional makeup, it left them horribly traumatized. Now, I also kind of by doing this kind of put like a I don't know. It would really depend on who your players were and if they were okay exploring those themes, I think, because that can be very touchy, especially if someone was the target of child abuse as a kid. For me, I don't know if the stuff that I went through would be considered child abuse, but I did go through some things. So that was, for me, it was kind of interesting to try to role play through some of those emotions and feelings, um, just to kind of get stuff out there. But so it's kind of like Changeling the Lost, and that there's some possible themes in there that might be awkward for people. But I would always tell people up front that that's kind of what the game was a little bit about. So, if this wasn't for you, then maybe you should sit this one out. But that was the idea, that something terrible happened to them as a kid. And I often told the players to come up with something that happened to them. It might not even come up in the game itself. It's just some sort of idea that um, is kind of like a deep wound in the character that never heals. Whatever happened, they've been horribly traumatized by it, horribly affected by it. In fact, so much so that they'll try to block it out of the memory. They'll try to bury it down as deep as inside of them as they can. But anyway, they are damaged good kids. Um, they're just not the same. They're not the same people they were uh, before this happened, or after this happened. So that's the main idea. So these kids are messed up. That's the premise. And because they're messed up, and because they've been warped and changed, their perception of reality has been affected and warped and changed. They'll start to notice things that other people don't see. And they might even start to think that they're maybe going a little crazy. They'll start to see doorways in places that other people don't see doorways. They'll see things moving. They'll see shadows. They'll see otherworldly type supernatural things that other people can't see. And as children, this should really freak them out a little bit, because mommy and daddy can't help them against this stuff. It's stuff that mommy and daddy can't see. And if they do talk to their parents about it, their parents will probably try to put them on some sort of drug, have them talk to some sort of psychiatrist or something. And for a small child to have to go through this is, again, traumatizing, because they start to feel like they are not like everyone else, that they're some sort of outcast, or that they outcast themselves because they realize that everyone else is different from they are. They start to wear a mask to try to, hide what they actually are. They try to pretend like they're normal, like everybody else. So these are some of the things I was thinking about. So your children, like I said, it's kind of based on the Grimm D20, where the children kind of they have like a sort of like a breakdown. Maybe I'll show it to you here, or talk about it, where they'll have like a cultural breakdown between like rural, suburban, and urban. So those are some things that get thrown around for your character, and it's based on D20, so there's skills, but they have different names for things, different names for skills. Like breaking stuff might be a skill, or like Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, gadgets and gizmos, games, ghost stories, hobbies, karate lessons, liar, liar, pants on fire, um, piano lessons, these sorts of skills that you would, kind of think might help or might be a part of a child's upbringing. Like Sunday school, baseball, slingshot, things like that for combat skills. Um, and then there's other ideas for like what would their class be as a child. So like the idea that some kids are bullies, some kids are dreamers, where they try to see things, have sort of interesting ideas or visions on things. You have your standard jock, your nerd, normal kid. What else we got here? There's like the outcast, which I think all of them should feel a little outcast because of their background and what happened to them. The popular kid. The popular kid would definitely probably have, the thickest mask out of all of them because he's trying to hide who he is to continue his own popularity. But yeah, so what did I want to talk about that stuff? So depending, like normal kid or whatever kind of kid they were beforehand, the horrible thing happened to them. They start to see weird stuff. And I've only really run this as a one shot at a couple of different conventions. And I would just hand out characters that were already pre-generated. And the idea was that at one point, curiosity gets the better of them. They go through one of these doorways or walkways. They go into that cave that they can tell is not normal, that maybe other people can't even see that cave entrance. They are kidnapped, per se, maybe, by some of the things that live in the place that those doorways lead to. So there's definitely that alternate dimension, alternate world, sort of like dark fairy tale thing going on there. But also with that warping and changing that they undergo, there's almost like a curse or blessing that comes with it, where I guess the curse is that they're not normal. They are, if they would come clean and talk about the things they hear in their heads, the things that they see, they'd probably be put away in a mental institution until they were 18 or something like that. So there's that whole thing going on. So for a one shot, I would generally have them come up with just some basic interconnections between the characters, maybe, or that when they get sucked into this alternate parallel world, it's kind of like boot camp. You throw a bunch of people in there, horrible stuff's happening to them. They've already had horrible stuff happen to them in their youth, and they band together because of it. So what is this alternate dimension, this alternate place, this dark fairy tale land? Now, where Grimm D20 does it, it really is pretty much a straight up fantasy with some horror elements thrown in there. And the setting that I came up with was kind of a mirror image of the real world, kind of like a shadowy, dark sort of place where, like, let's say if wherever town you live in, or city, or wherever you're at, you get sucked into this doorway, the alternate dimension will look like the place you live, only slightly different. Sorry about that. I really had to cough. Sometimes when I talk for long periods of time, my throat will get really dry and I can't talk anymore. But anyway, so I was talking about the curse and the blessing and the place that you get sucked to. You get taken away as a kid. And the blessing would be that with their mind and their imagination, they can affect their surroundings, they can affect the creatures of this place, and they can help themselves out. They can help their fellow kidnapped friends, the kids that are around them, help them out in some sort of way. And Grimm D20 does this as well, but really you can do this with any sort of system that has magic, skills, whatever. And yeah, the idea was that this alternate reality is like the real world, but different. And of course, there's monsters running around trying to eat kids. One of the things that I wanted to use in the game is a stat called Innocence, or a rating, whatever you want to use for whatever system you're going to use. And they could use Innocence to fuel this magic. Like, it would be a fairly large pool of points. But the interesting thing is that innocence can only be burned. You can never refresh it. So I think I think I did a one shot of this using BRP. Like the Call of Cthulhu Chaosium D100 roll under kind of system. And I started everybody off with an innocence of 100. But every time they cast a spell, or use the magic of their innocence, their creativity, that innocence would slowly decrease. And I had an idea that as innocence decreased, the more it decreased, the closer they were to becoming monsters themselves. Whereas if they couldn't escape this place by a certain time or a certain age, that they would become the monsters that lived there. So I wouldn't really tell the players that at first, but they would find that out throughout the course of the adventure. And as a one-shot, it really didn't work as a good thing because it's only one session. But as a campaign, the slowly dwindling innocence, I think, would hopefully kind of freak the players out and kind of give that fear that the kids would have of slowly losing who they were, having it drained away by monsters. I had monsters that literally sucked innocence out of the kids if they sunk their teeth into them or clawed them with their claws, bit into them. So not only would not only would casting these magic spells and such reduce their innocence, the monster's attacks could reduce it, and also their age could reduce it. And depending on, I think the way I had it set up, the younger the characters were, the more innocence they had, and the older they were, they would have a cap. So every year older that they could be, they would get a reduction in innocence. Which is basically just the idea that, that childlike innocence you have as a child slowly gets worn away. So I think the idea I had is if they didn't manage to escape this place by age 18, no matter how they had spent their points, it all basically just goes away and you become a monster. Sorry, I have to cough again. Alright, so in the setting itself, this idea of the loss of innocence and becoming a monster was kind of one that I thought was kind of interesting. And it brought upon the idea that some of the NPCs that they might encounter in the world might be like them, but at a further along time frame. So they might have monstrous traits, but they were still, you could still consider them, quasi children, where maybe they'd like to help or try to help. So these individuals that were, very close to becoming a monster themselves would be trying to warn them or try to tell them maybe don't cast these spells that you want to use, because by doing so you become like me. You become like the creatures that you're fighting. So it's almost the theme that by fighting evil you become evil itself, or by killing things you are actually killing the child inside you. And in a way, it almost kind of reinforced that violence begets violence, and I kind of like that idea. But again, it was something that I wouldn't say right away. It would be something that I would hope that maybe the players realized at some point. It's and again, in a one-shot, it doesn't really work so well. It's oh, I have 100 points to blow on stuff? Awesome. I'm just going to cast, spells left and right and, whatever. Which can also be fun. Don't get me wrong. It's fun to just, whip spells around and see what happens. And especially if they're more freeform. But so the idea that eventually, even though spells are advantageous, they are very detrimental to your character. And again, with the monsters devouring your innocence as well, and the older you are, that innocence dwindles. So everything pretty much in the setting itself, is making your innocence go down. So I really like that. I like that feeling of feeling trapped in the setting, and the main goal was to try to escape. So you have these NPCs that are possibly giving advice, telling them what not to do, what they did, and look at the results. Maybe they have They're starting to get sharp fingernails, and these are also the things that would happen to the characters. As they lose innocence and get older, they start to develop monstrous traits. But again, those can be kind of viewed as a blessing and a curse. They might have sharp claws or something, and that can help them in the fight against the monsters that have lost all of their innocence. You know, the quote unquote true monsters that were once children. As far as the overarching like structure of the place, I never really got a chance to develop that very much. Like who's in control, what is the reason for this place, you know, why does it even exist? Is it run by monsters that were once children, or was there originally like an original monster? Or has this place always existed? You know, there's a lot of thoughts like that that you could really have a good time with as a GM. Okay, another thing about the setting that I wanted to try to emphasize was that because it's like the real world but slightly different, I tried to instill in the players to role play out being children. And I think T. Walker, Tanner, talked about the difficulties and challenges of playing a childlike character. Because sometimes they would do things that would be detrimental to themselves. But that'd be like good role playing, you know. Maybe they can't move because they have like a deer in the headlights moment. Or, you know, they just curl up in a ball and just hide in the corner or something like that. Have hissy fits or just start crying, you know, things like that. So the reason I'm mentioning that is because since it's like the real world, I figured some characters might be like, okay, I'm going to go home because they recognize the streets, they recognize the towns and you know, the buildings and things that are in their childhood home. They might even try to go home. And I had a few characters that tried to do that. And they would find like items or teddy bears or things like that that were kind of like what their teddy bear or their item was like, but different. Sometimes they would have magical abilities, etc. And sometimes they would be traps, things that would reduce their innocence or start screaming and alert the presence of the kids so that monsters could come find them. Another game that kind of influenced my thoughts was Little Fears, and it's gone through two different renditions. There's the original Little Fears, which is a very dark game, but some people really like that. And then there's the more toned down version that just came out, Little Fears Nightmare Edition. But some of the themes that are in those games, Grimm D20 and Little Fears, and I think even White Wolf put out a book about kids and role-playing kids. There's several of them out there, and I kind of took bits and pieces of what I thought was best and kind of put them all together. So, I don't know. And for some people, role-playing kids is kind of creepy. And in some respects, I don't know. I guess I kind of enjoy that creepiness a little bit. I don't know. I think I mainly enjoy the challenge of it. And for instance, like reading books with child protagonists. I don't know. I like the Stephen King's The Talisman is a good example, where there's childlike protagonists and you're rooting for them, and they're in, you know, horrible places and you know, dealing with horrible things going on in the game or in the book. And the game, I guess, was trying to bring sort of that theme, that feel. Like the Dark Tower series by Stephen King also has like a main child protagonist that's in there, other than Roland the Gunslinger, but that's a different topic. I don't know. So yeah, that's basically the idea of the setting. The whole goal is to get home again, to find home. But maybe your players decide to do something different. Maybe they decide to try to get all the kids that find their way here or are kidnapped and brought here to have them get together and organize, maybe start their own kingdom. You know, you really could take it in different ways. So like maybe they're like doomed heroes where they think, you know, we're never going to find our way home. So we might as well make it as good as we can while we're here. So that's mainly it. I don't think there really was too much more to the setting. I've run it with high adventure role playing. I've done that, and I did BRP. Sorry, I think I must be coming down with something. I keep coughing like crazy. Anyway, but that's the idea. That was my main idea. I think there really isn't too much more, but I just thought feel like sharing with you guys. All right, I'm gonna get cough some more and go to work. All right, talk to you guys later.